This is a microphone test. Test 1 2 1 2.
This is another Zoom audio check for all of our participants. Zoom audio check. Testing 1 2. Zoom audio testing 1, 2. Zoom audio testing 1, 2, 3. Good morning, Blue Valley.
Good morning. There will be no sound on during this Nearpod activity. We'll be concluding it in about 3 minutes, and then we'll begin with the sound and the video presentation. Good morning, Blue Valley. This is Jennifer Luzinski, Director of Curriculum and Instruction, and I'm joined by our literacy team and blended learning team here this morning. We wanted to start you out with Nearpod, a bit of a soft launch on this Monday morning so that you could gather with your team and get ready for a morning that's going to be full of learning. You did the Olympic flag matching activity, and we had people who were fast and accurate on that, so great job. And then we asked you to use Nearpod for a draw it activity. And Lindsay Hallett just shared out an elementary example with all of you. Only elementary will be able to see it. And it looks like we have a new Olympic sport in the elementary world of bird watching. And then at the secondary level, Jeremy pushed out an example for all of you. Unfortunately, you all can't see it, but it looks like it's something all teachers face, and that is the restroom marathon, because we all know it can be a very long time until your plan period so you can actually use the restroom. So great job, everybody, and thanks for participating in those Nearpod events to start our morning. We're really looking forward to spending some time this morning with the best group of educators anywhere. And we're excited that you're gathered today as one group, virtually, but still one group ranging from early childhood through high school. Today, we're going to take time for the second half of learning on the science of reading and structured literacy. As a reminder, the content for this learning comes to us from our State Department of Education. In this second section, we will learn more about the remaining elements of structured literacy, discuss literacy assessments, and policies of our state. In part 2, our secondary teachers will see more elements of literacy which are relevant to your instruction, whether you teach ELA, physics, photography, or robotics. We all strive to develop effective learners and communicators in our disciplines, whether that involves reading, writing, or through discourse. These components are addressed today. In addition to these connections to your content, we're going to continue to learn more about how reading and language skills are developed. Having a deeper understanding of this allows you to better support your students and help them access your content and demonstrate their learning to you. Before we get started, I have a few housekeeping items. There was a link to a note-taking guide in your email on August 12th for those who would like to use it. I also want to remind you that as we continue our learning of the structured literacy approach and the vocabulary that it encompasses, our glossary of terms is included on the district's K-12 literacy canvas page. This glossary will continue to evolve and grow. I believe that we are going to put links to both of those resources in the chat for you this morning. Finally, I want to reintroduce the team who will be leading our learning today. First, you're going to hear from Stacy Cates. Stacy is our dyslexia consultant. Stacy is a licensed speech language pathologist. She has a private practice in Johnson County, and she supports many school districts across the Kansas City metro. Christy Rottinghouse will share some learning with you today. Christy is our K-12 literacy coordinator, and Colleen Zink will join us. We're excited because this year Colleen moves to a full-time role serving as our district dyslexia coordinator. We also want to acknowledge our amazing blended learning team, Brad Moser, Lindsay Hallett, and Jeremy Davis, who are with us and helping us today. And finally, our colleagues from IT, Kyle Weldon and Kyle Runge. Thanks to all of you for helping make this day successful. We hope you enjoyed engaging in the Community Spark activities to launch this morning through Nearpod. We're going to continue to use Nearpod to create opportunities for your PLC to collaborate today. As a reminder, this powerful tool for blended learning is available to all of our Blue Valley educators. If you want to know more about using it in your classroom, we shared a link in the PL Logistics email from August 12th, or you can contact Lindsay or Jeremy Davis, blended learning coordinators. I believe they emailed you on Friday. The first flag activity you completed used a new Nearpod tool, matching pairs. This activity option allows students to match images to images, text to images, or text to text. There are pre-made matching pair activities in the Nearpod library for you to use, or you can create your own. The second Olympic event activity leveraged the Draw It option. Nearpod's Draw It activity gives students many ways to demonstrate what they know. They can respond by drawing, they can respond with text or images on top of a blank canvas or whatever background the teacher uploads. You will be seeing a few more Nearpod activities throughout today's session. Think about how and when you could leverage Nearpod and its interactive activities in your classroom. While Stacy Cates joins you, let's take a moment to review the definition of structured literacy shown on the next screen. Yep. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the second half of learning on the science of reading and structured literacy. Many of you still may be asking, why structured literacy? The science and research and reading evidence is the why. We need to use structured literacy, and the structured literacy is the how we should approach teaching reading and what we need to teach differently to meet the needs of all of our students, which is all informed by years of science and research across many disciplines. Structured literacy is a gradual release model. I do, we do, you do. The terms of structured literacy and the science of reading are not synonymous. They are different. The why is the structured literacy and the how we approach teaching to reading. So here are those visuals that may look familiar from the last time we met. You'll notice the elements on one side and the principles on the other. Today, we're going to discover those final 4 elements in the structured literacy wheel and synthesize the methods behind structured literacy for future implementation in your classrooms. The elements are the what we teach, and the principles are the how we teach in structured literacy. Now, secondary folks, like you might not actively be teaching those foundational literacy skills in your secondary classrooms. However, you have to have a good understanding of how kids learn to read to better identify which of your older students are struggling and to then identify why those students are struggling with reading. Also, you will take note that morphology, semantics, and syntax, they're important elementary all the way through secondary classrooms. All right, let's take a chance and just look at these graphics. We see the aspects of the multi-sensory piece of structured literacy. Teaching is done using all learning pathways in the brain simultaneously in order to enhance memory and learning. The more pathways we give our children to input information, the more pathways they will have for retrieving that information. I want you guys to take another look at Scarborough's reading rope to get a good visual of how learning to read is not just the word recognition and decoding that you see in that blue strand at the bottom, but so many aspects of language comprehension go into becoming a skilled reader. Again, that reminder that if any one of those strands are weak, we will have a breakdown in our overall goal of reading, which is comprehension. All right, I want you to take a moment to digest this slide and this quote by Kate Nation. Older children who struggle with reading almost always have a deficit in decoding or vocabulary or both. Remembering that simple view, language comprehension and decoding, if we don't have both, we will not have efficient reading comprehension. So again, just take a moment as we switch seats to digest that quote, that older children who struggle with reading most always have a deficit in decoding or vocabulary or both.
We will start by looking at the third element of structured literacy wheel, syllables. Syllables are a part of phonics instruction. Most of us are comfortable with clapping and counting out syllables, but do you know how to use syllables for decoding and encoding? Understanding our syllables helps us understand the vowel sounds and spellings in words. Syllabication improves reading and spelling skills for all students. Working with syllables eliminates confusion for the students and will enable our K-12 staff to continue to develop their structured literacy skills as well. Take a minute to read the screen. Students need to know the definition of a syllable prior to learning the different types. Here is a multisensory way to teach students the definition that is easy to recall. A syllable is a word or part of a word with one vowel sound. Repeat it with me. A syllable is a word or part of a word with one vowel sound. As we implement structured literacy as a district, we will have common K-12 vocabulary and hand gestures that make the learning more kinesthetic, which builds more pathways to the knowledge. Syllable work starts with closed syllables in kindergarten and gradually increases through third grade. By third grade, Blue Valley students will have been taught all 6 syllable types. When introducing a syllable, students learn about single syllable words first and their patterns. As skills and developmental levels increase, the use of multisyllabic words are more practical. 4th and 5th grade students will review the syllable types and apply these skills to reading and spelling multisyllabic words. 6th through 12th grade students can utilize these skills with reading, spelling, and writing across the curriculums and throughout adulthood. These are the 6 syllable types in the order they are introduced in the elementary level. Words are made of these 6 syllable types. Today, we're going to go through the syllable types, learn the hand gestures, syllable patterns, and practice dividing a few words into syllables. Think of the word clover when you're trying to name the 6 syllable types. It is not the order of introduction in elementary, but it does help you to remember all 6 syllable types. Our first syllable type is a closed syllable. The pattern for the closed syllable is one vowel letter followed by one or more consonants, and the vowel sound is short. The hand gesture is a closed fist for closed syllable. Students need to know short vowel sounds to learn closed syllables. Closed syllables are taught first as they cover over 50% of syllables in words. Closed syllable is the C in clover. By 3rd grade, many students have a strong sight word vocabulary, meaning they recognize many words upon sight. Thus, pseudo words are a great way to require students to apply their phonics skills to unfamiliar words. These pseudo words adhere to the English spelling conventions as closely as possible. In the pattern CVC, C represents consonants and V is for vowels. Teachers should identify syllables throughout content areas and encourage students to identify them as well. This can help students decode unfamiliar words and learn how to pronounce them. Here are some examples of closed syllable words. I'm going to model beginning stages of syllable division with this pseudo word on the screen. First, I touch the vowels. Since there are 2 vowels, I know there are 2 syllables. There are 2 consonants lying between the 2 vowels. When you have 2 consonants between the vowels, you divide between those 2 consonants. If there are more than 2 consonants, you keep the letters that go together. For example, the blends, SL, ST, or digraphs, CH, TH. Now that I've divided the word, I cover up the second syllable and look at the first syllable. And I see it is a closed syllable. The vowel sound is the syllable is ton. Next, I cover up the first syllable and look at the second. I know it is also a closed syllable. The vowel sound is I, and the syllable reads sip. When I put them together, the whole word is ton-sip. As students become more familiar with syllable division, fewer prompts will be needed. Now it's your turn to divide a word by syllables. Take a look at the nonsense word in the rectangle on the screen. Write it down on a piece of paper if you need to. Follow the prompts on the screen to divide the syllables. For every syllable, remember, you have one vowel sound. Here is the way to divide the word Stomthip. Again, that is why we use pseudo words. Since there are more than 2 consonants between the vowels in this word, you keep the TH together. Nice job. Our second syllable type is silent E. The pattern for the silent E syllable type is one vowel letter followed by a consonant and a silent E at the end. The hand gesture is this. We use this hand gesture because it represents touching the 2 vowels in the word, which makes the V shape on the hand. Students can draw a V below the word to connect the 2 vowels if needed. The silent E has 6 different functions or jobs when at the end of a word. Making the vowel sound long is one of these jobs. Silent E is the E in Clover. Here are some silent E words on the screen. How would you divide this pseudo word? Take a second. Nice job keeping the FL blend together. The word is Knuckflume. The third syllable type is open syllable. The pattern for the open syllable type is one vowel letter with no consonants following the vowel in that syllable. The vowel sound is long. The hand gesture is an open hand. Open syllable is the O in Clover. Here are a few open syllable words. Notice you can just have a vowel in the open syllable words, A and I. In vacate, vey is your open syllable. Open syllables are found in consonant vowel pattern and in a vowel consonant vowel pattern. The VCV pattern is tricky, as there are 2 ways to divide a VCV pattern in a word. The first choice is always after the vowel, making the first syllable an open syllable. If you look on the screen, that makes your first choice word sliver. 60% of words with the VCV pattern will be correctly divided after the first vowel. But we know sliver isn't a real word. Therefore, we use the second choice, which is to divide after the consonant, which makes that first syllable a closed syllable, making the word sliver. 40% of words with the VCV pattern will divide after the consonant. If a student encounters a VCV word they do not know, the first attempt is dividing after the vowel, and then the second choice would be after the consonant. You don't want to use too many pseudo words with VCV words, as students will not know if they sound correct, as it does with real words. You have to read it both ways with pseudo words. 2 key words to remember with our open syllable choices is raven and robin. They will help you remember those 2 choices in our VCV patterns. Vowel team is our 4th syllable type. The pattern for a vowel team is 2 or more letters in a syllable that make one vowel sound. The vowel sound can be long, short, or other sounds like oi, ow. The vowel team is the V in Clover. Here are some vowel team words. This syllable type must be taught gradually through a systematic practice. CVVC is a common vowel team pattern. However, a vowel team can consist of 2, 3, or even 4 letters that represent one sound. Here is the hand gesture. IGH and AUGH are 2 examples of our longer vowel teams. The true definition of a vowel team is a group of letters that work together to make a single vowel sound. Diphthongs are a special vowel team where the mouth position shifts during the production of the single vowel phoneme. Oo is another example. When dividing words, you count the vowel team as one sound in the syllable. Sometimes it helps students to underline the vowel team. Think of where to divide this pseudo word. The pseudo word is Schoenfrau, or we could pronounce it Schoenfroh, as we know OW can make the ow or o sound. See why they're so tricky? Take a minute to look at some of the basic vowel teams introduced in elementary school through our new phonics resource, 95%. Knowing where the vowel team is used in words also helps increase spelling or encoding skills. For example, long A would be spelled AI in the middle of words and AY at the end of words. Our fifth syllable type is consonant LE. The pattern for consonant LE syllable type is a consonant letter plus the letter L and the vowel letter E at the end. The hand motion I like to use is consonant LE, circle back 3. Consonant LE is only found at the end of multisyllable words, and it is always an unstressed syllable. This syllable type is predictable and stable in the English language, meaning you can rely on the pronunciation to be very consistent. Consonant LE is the L in Clover. Here are some examples of consonant LE words. Consonant LE, circle back 3. That is where you divide that syllable, like in turtle. Do you hear the vowel sound in the second syllable of turtle? Say tul real slow with me. T-oh. The vowel sound is actually a schwa. You hear it between the consonant T and the L. Say it again. Tul. T-oh. The silent E is at the end as an orthographic marker, basically so our brain sees a vowel. Look at the divided words on the screen. Knowing where to divide helps determine the first syllable type. Look at bugle, for instance. Otherwise, if you had another G, it would be bugle. This really helps with encoding or spelling and decoding of words. Here are some more consonant LE words. Our final syllable type is vowel R. The pattern for the vowel R syllable type is one vowel letter immediately followed by the consonant letter R. The vowel sounds are or, and R. The hand signal is the R in sign language. Vowel R is the final letter in Clover. The R controls or changes the vowel sound. Here are some examples of vowel R words. These syllable types are numerous and difficult for students to master in spelling. If a student has a phonological weakness, this syllable type will be especially difficult. AR and OR are more simple as they have very distinct sounds. Is more difficult as it has many spelling choices. The most common are ER, IR, and UR. In our next Nearbot activity, we're going to have you divide words into syllables and then sort them by the second syllable in the word. For example, look at basketball on the screen. It has 3 syllables. Ket is the second syllable, and it is a closed syllable. Therefore, I would sort it under closed syllables. The activity you're going to be doing is a new activity in Nearpod called drag and drop. We'll give you a few minutes to divide the words and sort. Sorry if some of you are having a hard time getting into Nearpod. Here are the answers to the Nearpod activity. From what I saw on Nearpod, it looks like most of you did a great job sorting the syllables by the second syllable in the words. You did a great job keeping the blends together when dividing the words. Take a look at the screen and see how you did. Now, we would like you to take a minute and do a turn and talk with your PLCs. How might you implement syllabication in your content area that you teach every day? Take a moment to discuss it. Okay, we're back. I hope you had some great discussions. The syllable sorting activity used the drag and drop feature in Nearpod. This is a brand new feature, which is unfortunately something that you can hopefully get on and experience at another time if you had difficulties connecting today. Drag and drop is an activity that gives students a way to sort, order, or organize items. Images, words, or shapes are sorted sequentially or in a thematic group, and they practice the higher level critical thinking skills to show what they know in new ways. In the classroom, this type of activity can be used for instructional purposes, such as sorting into categories and charts, ordering events along a timeline, or sequencing sentences or paragraphs, to name a few.
Now we will move on to the fourth element of the structured literacy wheel, morphology. Before we dig into morphology, it is essential to understand this common vocabulary. Morphology is the study of morphemes, which are the smallest units of meaning in words. Just like students need to be aware that words are made of individual sounds or phonemic awareness, They also need to know that words are made of morphemes, morphological awareness. We will talk about ways to build this in our students. Please consider this question as we move through this section of the training today. Why does structured literacy call for explicit and sequential teaching of morphology? Morphology instruction in structured literacy moves from simple to complex, just like any other aspect of it. What should morphology instruction look like in middle school and high school so students' knowledge of morphemes is deep and helps them define unknown words using this knowledge? Morphological knowledge is another tool students should have to read unfamiliar words. This supports them in moving from decoding words by sounds to breaking up words by morphemes. The decoding piece must come first. Instruction in phonological awareness and phonics is the foundation to build morphological awareness and a competent understanding of morphology. Students' comprehension of text will increase as they study morphemes. There is no time limit when students can develop morphological awareness. Because it has such an impact on reading, vocabulary, and writing, it merits our attention. Note the word systematic in the quote from Louisa Moats at the bottom of the screen. The skills in structured literacy do not develop in isolation. Strengthening one strand positively impacts the others. Let's start digging into building a common vocabulary, just like you would do with your students. One type of morpheme is a base. It holds the core meaning of the word. There are two types of bases. The first is a free base. This is a standalone word. The second type of base is a bound base. This type must be part of a larger word. It still holds the core meaning of the word, but prefixes and/or suffixes must be added to create a whole word. Another important term to know is affix. When adding a prefix to a word, we change the meaning of the word, like wrap to unwrap. When adding a suffix, we change the part of speech. A simple example is adding ed to a verb to shift it to past tense. A bit more complex would be adding the suffix ion to the word emote to create emotion. The part of speech changed from a verb to a noun.
Welcome to the RISE Arkansas Morphology Minute. English is a glorious conglomeration of many languages. Today we are going to learn about the various layers of the English language. This information is adapted from Words by Marcia K. Henry. The foundation of the English language is built on words of Anglo-Saxon origin during the Old English period. Although these words only comprise a small percentage of the total words in the language, they are used with the greatest frequency. Words in this layer were used to name people, objects, and events of daily life, such as words like friend, love, dog, and house. The majority of the words in the English language come from the Romance languages, which have Latin origins, including Spanish, Italian, French, Romanian, and Portuguese. These words are often technical and sophisticated and used for formal purposes like textbooks. Latin roots can be affixed to form many new words. For example, from rupt comes rupture. The top layer of the language consists of Greek words. These are specialized words used frequently in math and science. Photosynthesis, thermometer, biosphere, hemisphere, and polynomial are all Greek words. Thanks for watching our RISE Morphology Minute. We will be exploring each layer more in future Morphology Minutes, so come back and check it out. Don't forget to like and share.
This video, which you can access in the K-12 Literacy Canvas course, provides insight why the English language seems so crazy.
Welcome to the
But it isn't. It seems crazy and illogical, but 85% of our words are predictable if we know the patterns, rules, and origins. This is what structured literacy will provide our students. Only 20% of our words come from an Anglo-Saxon origin, but make up a great part of our everyday vocabulary. These are basic number and color words, names for common objects, and many of our phonetically irregular words like was or said. The majority of words in the English language originated in Latin. These words are precise, interesting, and more sophisticated than Anglo-Saxon words. They are common in text, but uncommon in everyday language. Another 11% of words are derived from Greek. They often involve science, school, and the arts. They are specialized and domain specific. For those who have done the math, these percentages don't add up to 100%. The English language is comprised of words from many other languages that account for the remaining 14%. This is why students who excel in spelling bees frequently ask what the origin of the word is, because it gives them a gigantic clue to the spelling. The best practice for teaching morphology is with a problem-solving approach, not through memorization of word lists. Students need to investigate words and be asked thought-provoking questions about those words. Teach morphology in application, not through isolated and disjointed activities. Look at words in your content areas and pick 2 or 3 morphemes that will build student vocabulary, both for the current unit of study and for future encounters with unfamiliar words. Finally, just like we need to strengthen phonological awareness in students in order to decode and spell, we also need to utilize morphemic awareness activities with the morphemes you have chosen to study. Morphological awareness activities are relevant for all grade levels and across all content areas. These are auditory manipulation activities for students and require them to think carefully about word parts. The manipulatives on the screen are small rectangular pieces of construction paper or note cards or cardstock. There would be nothing printed on them since morphological awareness activities are always completely oral. No print is involved. They're labeled just so you could see which color stands for which part of the word. So as you move through these activities, which take no more than 2 to 3 minutes of your day, students would have these cards at their desk to manipulate as needed. The goal is to complete the activities without these, but that is unique to the student. Some may need it longer than others. Depending on the complexity of the words you will be using, students will need more than one of each of the colored cards. Here are some examples that move from simple to complex. A lower level example would be, show me the morphemes for the word cupcake. Students would drag down 2 white cards while pointing and saying cup and cake. The teacher would then ask questions. What is the first word that makes up cupcake? Students point to the first white card and say cup. What is the second word that makes up cupcake? Students point to the second white card and say cake. Now we want students to manipulate the cards to add, delete, or substitute morphemes. So delete cup from cupcake and say the new word, cake. Add pan to the beginning of cake and say the new word. And we would have students move these cards, even though the white card is moving out and right back in, it's that physical representation of the different morphemes that they need to represent. A mid-level example would be, what does the prefix un mean in the word unasked? It means not, of course. Using the manipulatives, show how we would represent the word unasked. So then as students move the cards, they say the morpheme represented by the card. Unasked. Now notice I said the way each morpheme is pronounced, not how it is spelled. So the suffix in this word is ed, but says t in this word. So the teacher continues to ask questions while students move cards to represent their answers. Students would answer aloud. For now, just think of the answers in your mind. What is the prefix in unasked? What is the base in unasked? What is the suffix in unasked? Asking questions like this reinforces the vocabulary associated with morphology. So the teacher would continue on, so we can manipulate those cards now. Change the base in unasked to tap and say the new word, untapped. Delete the prefix in untapped and say the new word. This would keep going until students have built several new words through manipulation. A higher level example would be if the bound base we were working on was spect. I am going to quickly run through these questions, but would appreciate your participation with your group by responding aloud this time. The word is respectful. What is the suffix in respectful? What is the prefix in respectful? You get re. What is the base in respectful? Add the prefix dis to respectful and say the new word. Add the suffix ly to disrespectful and say the new word. Delete the first prefix in disrespectfully and say the new word. Change the last suffix in respectfully to ness and say the new word. Now change both suffixes in respectfulness to ing and say the new word. Change the prefix in respecting to in and say the new word. Change the suffix in inspecting to and say the new word. If you noticed, I purposefully pause after the first part of the question to give the student time, especially our students with dyslexia or other learning challenges, to process what is being asked so they can find in their mind where that part of the word is and know what to do with it then. As you and your students work with new morphemes, you could build a wall like you see on the screen or a board dedicated to them. It becomes interactive when the students can manipulate the cards or sticky notes to create words, as seen below the bases section on this board. At the bottom of the board are several posters with word matrices. These are another strategy to use with students in morphology. A word matrix breaks down words into the smallest units of meaning, base and affixes. Word matrices have many applications in your morphology instruction. The first is to build a matrix with your students to make the learning multisensory. The base is placed in the center. Affixes are attached to the left or right of the base. The left side is for prefixes. So here we made the word replay, display, and outplay. And the right side is for suffixes. You can make the word replayed now, displayed, or outplayed. Here are more suffixes we can add. Divisions are made to show the building of morphemes. Notice the colors match those that were used to build morphological awareness. Green for prefixes, like green go, white for the base, and blue for suffixes. You read a word matrix like if you drew connecting lines from the prefix to the base to a suffix. You cannot skip over and you cannot go vertically. So here we have made words like played, replayed, players, displaying, to name a few. The second way to utilize a word matrix is to give the students a completed one, and they have to write words represented in the matrix. Of course, all of these morphemes would have been taught already. An important rule with the matrix is if you pass through a box, you have to use something from the box. For example, starting in the upper left-hand box and going to the right, we can make the word deconstruction. Deconstruction. Recalling the meanings of the individual morphemes to define the whole word is the last but most important part of this tool. Doing so brings the learning of the individual morphemes full circle to create a coherent definition of the whole word. So this path through the matrix is not acceptable to make the word obstructed. You see, we passed through the box with the suffix URE, but didn't include it in the word. And so you cannot go that way. You will use a Nearpod Collaborate board to see how many words you can create using this matrix. We'll give you a few minutes to do so. Remember, if you pass through a box, you have to use something from the box. Welcome back. A lot of you thought of so many great words. The matrix activity used a Collaborate board in Nearpod. The Collaborate board is an interactive discussion board that allows students to post text and images to a shared class board. It's a great way to spark class discussion, brainstorm, or check in on how students are feeling. Student names can be shared or remain anonymous. So here's a very short list of possibilities from the matrix. The third way to use a word matrix is to give the students a word, and they have to make a mini matrix for that word. This is a prime opportunity to build vocabulary. Ask what each morpheme means to create a coherent definition. Don't just give it to our students. We want to make them think, apply, and transfer knowledge. As you are considering words for teaching vocabulary, these are the types of activities you can plan for instruction. These focus on parts of words whose meaning we can know and provides a very good entry point for language learners and students with reading challenges. Word sums are another great tool when teaching morphology. I will show you 3 ways to scaffold learning with this tool. The first is the teacher supplies the word and the word sum to demonstrate the breakdown of a word into morphemes. The second way is the teacher gives the blanks for the number of morphemes in a word and the whole word so the student can complete it. So for heated, there's 2 morphemes, and the student would have to break them down into those 2. So here are your answers. And finally, the teacher just supplies the word and the student creates the word sum all on their own. They have no benefit of the blanks. That would be the highest level. Even though these are called word sums, we do not use an equal sign, and here is why. The 2 sides are not truly equal to each other since a spelling rule had to be applied and letters changed. So therefore, we change our verbiage to reflect that the 2 sides of the equation are not necessarily equal. For this word sum, we would say un plus decide plus id is rewritten as undecided. So when they get to the arrow, instead of, we're not going to say equal, we'd say is rewritten as. So now on a piece of paper, complete these word sums. We'll take a few minutes and then we will check our answers. So let's take a look at our answers. This word was straightforward since no spelling changes occurred. However, there was a spelling change here. The suffix is y, meaning the quality of, but it had to change to an I because the second suffix being added started with a vowel. Indescribable has 4 morphemes. The silent E on scribe had to be dropped because the suffix able starts with a vowel. Relocation also had 4 morphemes, with the silent E dropped from the third one. Morpheme instruction begins as early as kindergarten, learning S as a suffix to mean plural. Starting this year, our 4th and 5th grade students will utilize Vocabulary Surge to learn morphemes. This moves us beyond vocabulary lists and builds a deeper understanding of words. This work leads to more accurate decoding and encoding, which improves fluency and comprehension. Take a couple minutes now, think back to what Christy was talking about with syllables, and divide these 4 words into syllables. We'll take about 2 to 3 minutes to do that and then come back and check our answers. So divide them into syllables. Here are your answers, how to divide these words into syllables. We teach all children about syllables to help them decode new words. They need to be able to pronounce a word before diving into the meaning. If you have a question about these words, put them into the chat. Now, take the same words and divide them into morphemes. We'll take a couple minutes to do this one. unmuted. So in the chat, we had a question about perimeters. So I'm going to go back a few slides to the answers with that. So the way that we would divide that word, you have the ters at the end, right? Perim, when you say it, I did look this up in a dictionary to make sure that this would be accurate. The way that they have it divided in the dictionary says pa, rim, ters. I think it sometimes depends on the way you say it, because I might say per imiters, and then the R would go with the first syllable. But according to the dictionary there, it said perimeters, hence 4 syllables. So I hope that answered your question. So let's look at the morphemes now. In blue is still what we had for our syllables, and now over in orange is what the morphemes are. You see that they are all different. But this is why we teach decoding first, so the students can pronounce those words. Then they will recognize them. Their brain might hear that word and then understand, I've heard that before. Oh, this is how it's spelled. Now here's what it means. And we break it into those morphemes. So you're teaching morphemes to students so they can determine the meaning of the whole word by putting together the meanings of the individual morphemes. Again, this is the simple view of reading. And you see how perimeters was divided here, peri, meter, and s. Knowledge of morphology helps students acquire meaning of derived and inflected words, which in turn promotes reading comprehension. In teaching morphemes, the student is made aware of semantic connections between words and consistent spellings. English orthography will appear much less arbitrary when students are shown the repetitive patterns that are common within groups of words sharing the same affix and root. Learning about word origins and word structure can be a motivating experience, which promotes word awareness and learning. Teaching vocabulary using morphemic analysis can enhance vocabulary, comprehension, and spelling. So now take 5 to 7 minutes to discuss with your PLC how morphology instruction will be incorporated with your content area this year. I hope you had some good discussions with your PLC about how morphology can be incorporated into your content area. So thank you for your attention during the syllable and morphology portion of today's training. We will now take a 10-minute break. Welcome back from your break. Did you know that automatized handwriting significantly improves both the quantity and quality of writing? Writing by hand improves brain efficiency. The process of handwriting helps the brain develop functional specialization. It integrates thinking, movement control, sensation, and activates massive regions in the brain involved with language and working memory. So in other words, multiple parts of the brain get involved in the task at the same time. So rather than use technology in the section about syntax, you will need paper and something to write with to complete the interactive activities. Syntax is part of the language comprehension side of the simple view of reading equation. It is defined as the set of rules that govern the sequence and functions of words in a sentence to convey meaning. Syntactic awareness means having the ability to monitor the relationships among the words in a sentence in order to understand while reading or composing orally or in writing. Students build syntactic awareness through exposure to oral language when they are young, and particularly through exposure to written language that they hear through read aloud or independent reading. We teach syntax explicitly to improve reading comprehension at the sentence level, which is often where comprehension breaks down. Likewise, we teach syntax at the sentence level to improve writing. If our students cannot compose sentences with a variety of structures and complexity, we cannot ask them to write a paragraph or an essay. Students need to understand that groups of words within a sentence convey meaning. Students who lack the ability to chunk words into meaningful phrases while reading have a more challenging time comprehending text than their peers who can do this proficiently. Our students must understand the variety of sentence structures involved in narrative, informative, and opinion writing, and be able to write about that narrative, informative, and opinion writing. Teaching syntax will build oral language, improve students' writing, and improve reading comprehension. William Van Cleve, a leader in the world of structured literacy and dyslexia, wisely said, "We teach grammar to improve writing. If you cannot justify teaching a particular concept in terms of improving a student's writing, don't teach it." Good grammar instruction involves an understanding of the way words, phrases, and clauses interact with one another to create meaning. So the best way to teach syntax is not in isolation. We do not want students only memorizing terminology or labeling parts of speech. Decades of research indicate isolated grammar instruction does not improve writing. When grammar is taught this way, students learn to fear or despise it. We are not teaching syntax only when problems arise. If you only address grammar as problems arise in student writing, there is no overarching framework to put all the ideas together. Students are robbed of valuable practice necessary to internalize concepts. No link is made between writing and reading comprehension, and there is no development of common vocabulary or language to talk about sentence structure. We can make syntax instruction effective and engaging. We will teach students the vocabulary of syntax, like clause, subject, predicate, noun, to facilitate better writing and reading. We will teach concepts in a logical, explicit, sequential approach. This takes the mystery out of writing and makes it more accessible for all students. Learning sentence structure helps students to clarify meaning within and between sentences. So in a moment, I'm going to show you 4 sentences. Have one person in the group read each sentence aloud with an emphasis on the bolded word. Then discuss with your group how the placement of the bolded word changes the meaning of the sentence. The complexity of syntax increases as the text our students are reading also become more complex. This is the common structure our students experience when first learning to read in kindergarten through second grade. There's a subject, there's a verb, an object, and modifiers. We have them expand the standard format with modifiers to lengthen and add variety to their sentences. When students move from decodable predictive text, syntax takes precedence. Research shows that the verb in the sentence moves further from the beginning in complex text. This demands that students group phrases and clauses into meaningful word order to maintain fluency and comprehend text. Read these two sentences, paying attention to the groupings of phrases and clauses that must occur to facilitate comprehension. Our students need exposure to complex text to be able to handle the syntactic demands it poses. Here are basic parts of speech that are relevant to all grade levels. With a partner, can you quickly define each and give an example for everyone? If we limited our teaching to these definitions only, we have done nothing to improve student writing or comprehension. So now on a piece of paper, write down these words and the part of speech for each one. You will have about 2 minutes to do so, and then we will check our answers. So here we go. Let's check our answers. This isn't an exhaustive list for these words. I'm going to slowly reveal each one so you can check your answers against these. So now, in the words of William Van Cleve, don't ask what a word is, ask what a word does. This concept is essential to syntax instruction. Students must understand the job or function a word plays in a sentence to truly understand the meaning the author is communicating. Explicit and systematic instruction in syntax will improve their own writing. It is not enough to teach the grammatical system. If this teaching is to affect writing, then it must be explicitly applied to writing. When introducing parts of speech to your students, keep the introduction brief and straightforward. The more complex nuances of a part of speech comes later, since structured literacy moves from simple to complex. Then you want to write sentences with the students and find good examples in text. Discuss why they are good examples. And finally, the students need to apply the new concept and write. This 4-part model to syntax instruction was developed by William Van Cleve. The identify step helps students identify the element you are teaching in pre-existing sentences. It is a very small percentage of time in the lesson. It is important, but do not get bogged down right here. The next step, expand, helps students expand basic sentences and ideas into more sophisticated ones, which increases their syntactic awareness. The third step, combine, helps students combine basic sentences into more sophisticated ones with greater syntax complexity. It is one of the most powerful strategies in writing instruction. Combining sentences increases student vocabulary and reading comprehension. It teaches students to use a variety of sentences in their writing. It helps improve the overall quality of the writing by increasing the amount and quality of the revision. The process encourages interesting word choices and transition words. It helps students focus on what is important to include in a sentence. It improves fluency in writing. Extensive research has found it to be the most effective way of teaching grammar. Students gain greater control over syntax. The final step is sentence creation. This helps students apply the studied element into the context of their own writing. If your students haven't generated any examples or practiced the concept in their own speaking and/or writing by the end of the lesson, then we've missed the boat. We want to make sure we are making the most use of our time. So let's take a look at all of these just a little bit closer. In the identify step, give students sentences and have them find the grammar element you are working on. In the first sentence, it's adjectives, and the second is nouns. The number in parentheses indicates how many they need to find. Providing the number is just one way you can scaffold this activity. In this step, give students a sentence and ask them to add to it to make it more interesting and complex. In this case, we were working on adjectives, so that is what students were asked to add. So please, in your group and on a piece of paper, take 2 minutes to complete this activity and share with your group, and we'll go for 2 to 3 minutes. I sure would be able to I would love to be able to hear some of those sentences because they always turn out great. Now, to complete this activity, you will combine the shorter sentences into one longer sentence while retaining the meaning of each sentence. Write and then share with your group. We'll take about 4 minutes for this activity. Okay, so finally, in the create step, students are applying the learned element to their own writing. You provide the parameters they need to write and let them go. But do not just end your lesson there. Use their writing and discuss how they incorporated what was given, if the element was used in the right way, etc. Keep the learning going. We're going to take 2 minutes to write 1, 2, or all 3 on your own and share with your group. So one way to make syntax multisensory and engaging is sentence unscrambling. This is a good activity for students who need practice with syntactic patterns, particularly English language learners and struggling readers and writers, but it helps all students expand their repertoire. So you would hand out cards with words already on them and purposely put students out of order at the front of the room. Read the words aloud and have students unscramble to create a sentence that makes sense. Identify parts of speech that you have taught them. You could scaffold this activity by not having capital letters or periods, or add them in, whatever your students need. You can make it interesting in reinforcing the concepts you are teaching. For our younger students or students still developing their writing skills, provide the words for them. Scaffold it by telling them, I have the word fluffy. Where would we put this to describe the dog? For older students, have them think of the words. We need an adjective to describe the dog, or what adverb could tell how the dog ran. Can the students play with the placement of the words? Move around and see how it changes the meaning of the sentence. To make it multisensory, you can have students link arms to show relationships between the parts of speech or the parts of the sentences, like subject and predicate could link together, adjective and noun, or words in a phrase. This activity can also be done at individual student desks. You would give students small cards with the words on them, and they manipulate them to make sentences, and then share and discuss. This activity is a great opportunity to improve comprehension of content at any grade level by making the sentences about your current unit of study. That is the end of our syntax training today, so please take a few minutes in your PLC to discuss how you can incorporate these types of activities to improve your students' writing.
I hope you had a few minutes to talk about how syntax can be embedded into the work you do with students in your grade level or in your course content. We're going to move on to semantics, the sixth and final element on our structured literacy wheel. Take a look at this definition of semantics. You will notice that it is the study of language both literally and figuratively, as well as how it conveys meaning. Let's think for a minute about the two components of the simple view of reading, language comprehension and decoding. You can see how semantics is essential for language comprehension, especially at the word and phrase level. In order for students to develop strong reading comprehension, they must be able to comprehend language utilized by an author or a speaker. This is why instruction in semantics is essential. All learners benefit from learning semantics, but it is especially important for students with reading challenges, including dyslexia, our English language learners, and students with developmental disabilities. So, as we focus on semantics as a vehicle for helping students build language comprehension, consider the following sentence. What did the employee do in this sentence? Think for a minute. Ask yourself, what evidence do you have that you are correct? Turn and talk with your teammates about what they think happened in this sentence now. Did you all agree? There really are two possibilities that may have occurred. In a literal usage, beans were actually spilled. Whereas in a figurative or idiomatic meaning, this is an expression that conveys that someone told a secret or ruined a surprise. Additional context in the sentence would help provide clarity to the meaning. This example is rather simple, but certainly shows how semantics gives meaning to the words, both literally and figuratively. The previous slide showed how phrases can convey meaning. This is also true at the word level. When we encounter multiple meaning words, either written or spoken, we must use context to apply the appropriate meaning to the word. Consider this sentence. I climbed into the blocks to start my race. Without background knowledge, you can imagine how students might have confused the picture on the top right for the intended meaning, the picture on the bottom right, the runner getting into the starting blocks. When teaching multiple meaning words, it can be very helpful for students to have visuals to support each meaning. These can be provided by the teacher or could be a part of the learning activity for the student. Words that have multiple meanings are said to be polysemous. Using the morphology we learned earlier today, we know that the morpheme poly means many and sema equals signs. So polysemous words are words that have many meanings for one word. The most commonly or frequently encountered meanings of words are typically activated first. So a younger student might conjure up an image of Legos upon hearing the word block, whereas a member of a high school football team might initially think of stopping the motion of an opponent in a football game. You can see here how context is important and how our own background knowledge comes into play. You'll note that in this graphic, both readers, the purple and the blue, associated bark as the sound made by a dog. Let's consider how a reader's or a listener's comprehension breaks down when they're using another meaning for a word. Their association of the meaning bark as the outer layer of a tree trunk is not wrong, but it could certainly impact the student's comprehension. This is why semantics is an essential part of language learning for our students. Some of you might be wondering about words that are polysemous and homonyms. It's important to know that homonyms are words that sound the same, but they have different spellings and different meanings, where words that are polysemous have the same spelling with multiple meanings. Let's look at some instructional practices teachers can use to help students learn words that are polysemous. It can be helpful for students to examine the work of authors to talk about the word choice used by the author in a particular sentence within a text. Authors are often capable of using rich vocabulary and examples that serve as mentors for students, and this helps give them meaningful ways to interact with the text or the passage. Another activity is during the writing process to try to ask students or have them ask themselves, is there a better word for this? This is a great opportunity in the writing process for peer feedback, or it's a great question for students to use as a point of focus during the writing or revision process. Developing readers tend to utilize words whose meaning and spelling are familiar. This leads to overuse of words such as nice, good, fun, or bad. Placing an emphasis on word choice in the writing process supports students in moving beyond general, less specific words. Shades of meaning activities are a great way to get a quick look at how students are comfortable or how they're learning words that are being studied. This can be done by having students physically move to 3 corners of a room, or they can show fingers to indicate, I've never heard that word before. I've heard it, but I'm not really sure what it means, or 3 fingers to indicate, I know that word and I could use it accurately in a sentence. It's a quick, formative way for teachers to see how students are progressing in their learning. Shades of meaning or continuum activities are great examples of how we can help students to find the nuanced meaning between words. We'll see some examples of those soon. We want to build in application steps for students. We want them to write the words. We want them to speak using the words. This is what really helps embed these new words into their long-term memory. And we'll see some examples of that soon. In particular units across all content, we want students to build connections between and among words. Word walls, word webs, all of those are ways of showing associations. In activities such as this, the discussion is where the impactful learning happens. This allows teachers to clear up any misconceptions students may bring to the conversation and to gather data on where each student is in his or her learning, and for classmates to bring different words or thoughts about connections into the conversation. And finally, we want students to create associations between and among words. We're going to do some of this in the next steps. Let's assume that a teacher, as part of a unit of study, is needing to make sure that students know the meaning of the word catastrophe. The first thing the teacher would do is provide students with a student-friendly definition. This seems rather obvious, but if students don't know the meaning of words in a definition, it will be hard for them to fully access the meaning of the new word. The next step would be to provide students with an image of the word and, where possible, a gesture. This is a nod to the importance of multisensory learning for deep learning and quick recall. In this instance, you can see the teacher provided a picture of a tornado, certainly a catastrophic event, and a gesture students could use for imprinting the word catastrophe into their memory is potentially to make the swirl of a tornado. Next, the teacher could look at the syllables, the morphemes, and the phonology of the word. We now know this is important because syllable knowledge helps us to accurately decode words, and morphology helps us to determine word meanings. Examining the sounds in the word helps us to store that word in our long-term memory too. Let's continue looking at activities a teacher could utilize to create lasting associations for the word catastrophe. You can see here as the teacher spelled the word, and perhaps the students were spelling it along with her on paper or a whiteboard, that the teacher spelled the word and said the name of each letter as writing it. This is, again, a nod toward that multisensory pathway that really helps students to make lasting imprinting or the word to stay with them. In this next step, the teacher would make statements about the word catastrophe, and students would indicate if they were correct or true by raising their thumbs up, or if they were not true, giving a thumbs down. So, for example, the teacher might say, "It is a catastrophe if a flood washes out a bridge," and students would indicate thumbs up. Or the teacher might say, "I didn't get to watch my favorite show last night. What a catastrophe." And of course, there would be rich conversation about whether or not that was an actual catastrophe. It's important for teachers to provide students time to turn and talk and generate additional examples of the meaning of the word. This allows for great discussion and meaningful use of the word by the students, and also opportunities to clarify the meaning and make sure that students are actually on the right path with the definition and meaning of this new word. Students can use the words in sentences as they move on in deepening their knowledge. This can be either oral or written work. And finally, another means of creating strong knowledge of new words is through some of the activities mentioned on this slide: games, word sorts, word webs, and using text with the words embedded in it. Let's take a look now at some examples of some activities teachers could utilize to help teach students semantics. Although rather elementary, this web is a great example of students learning multiple new words and making connections among and between words. A map such as this could be something that students contribute to or add to as the unit of study progresses. The arrows help to show the connections or intersections between words that are being learned and studied in this new unit. Semantic gradients, or are often called shades of meaning activities, are great tools to help students learn word meanings or semantics. They help broaden and deepen students' understanding of related words. They help students to distinguish between shades of meaning, and they really enhance student vocabulary, which helps them to be more precise and imaginative in both their speaking and their writing. A class may have encountered a passage in which an author used the phrase, "resting my eyes." This may not be familiar to all the students in the class. And so after providing a definition for resting my eyes and some examples or non-examples, students working individually or in small groups could complete an activity such as this. A gradient, by the way, can be as long or short as the teacher wants it to be. This is a way of scaffolding this activity for students. So in this instance, the teacher wanted the students to help learn shades of meaning in words related to sleep, including resting my eyes. These words that you can see in the gradient now are not the only words that could have been chosen. And this is where discussion is so valuable. Not only does it allow students to clarify meaning of the words, but through hearing the perspective and ideas of others, they learn additional related words. A way of scaffolding this activity for students would be to provide a word bank. You would want to have more words than spaces available on the gradient. You can also expand this activity for students by talking about words on the gradient in terms of those which have positive or negative connotations, or words that are appropriate for formal writing versus ones used more in informal conversations. So there's lots of ways to extend the use of a shades of meaning or semantic gradient activity. We're going to take a minute now to ask you in your PLC to make your own semantic gradients. Each teacher will try their own. We're going to start with the word slow. Each person should draw a 5-part gradient and put slow into the middle spot. Do this now. I'll give you 2 minutes to build your own semantic gradients. Okay, I hope you had enough time to make your own 5-part gradient using the word slow. In the next step, because the discussion is really where the value of this activity comes in, I'm going to ask you to each share your gradients with members in your group. We used a really simple word, slow, but notice, did someone use words you didn't? Were there words that you disagreed with? At the end, does this make you want to revise your own gradient? Let's take 2 minutes for you to share and discuss now. Okay, I hope that talking about the semantic gradients or shades of meaning activity that you just completed in your PLC gave you a chance to see how important it is for students to have conversation about the words. Not only are they using the words, but they're really starting to distinguish the nuances or shades of meaning between and among words. We're going to take a look at another example of a gradient that you could use to deepen students' semantic knowledge. In this activity, students were provided words, including 2 antonyms, and it was their job to organize the words on this continuum or gradient. Depending on the age of the students and the complexity of the vocabulary, the number of words you use can vary. To make the task more challenging, students could be provided with only the antonym or near antonym pair, and then they would add a certain number of other words on their own. Again, in tasks like this, the discussion is equally important. It gives you, the teacher, great formative data, and it allows students to make adjustments to their thinking after hearing the thoughts of others. This is another example of a gradient. In this instance, students were learning the word tepid. You can see that it's marked with a star. In this case, the teacher provided the students with only the word tepid, and they were to build a gradient using other words. As we wrap up our time learning about the 6th element of structured literacy, I thought I would let Calvin and Hobbes remind us again of why it is so important to explicitly teach semantics to our students. In just a minute, we're going to transition, and Stacy is going to come back and talk with us about literacy assessment. As we prepare for that transition, I wanted to show this final slide in the area of structured literacy. It shows both of the wheels combined. The outer layer contains the principles of structured literacy: systematic, cumulative, explicit, and diagnostic. That outer wheel wraps the inner circle that contain the 6 elements of what students are taught and learn in structured literacy. Stacy is going to come and join us to talk next about assessment.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Welcome back. At this point, we are going to discuss the importance of universal screening in reading. Hi, everyone. My apologies for that. A little bit of technical difficulties. All right, so welcome back and congratulations on making your way through the remaining elements of structured literacy. I know many of you are already thinking of ways you may alter your classroom instruction. Some of you may still be processing how this will impact your classrooms. And some of you might be feeling overwhelmed with the start of a new school year and digesting so much information. Try to remember, this is an ongoing learning process. We do not expect you to walk away as experts. And at this moment, we are going to shift gears a bit and talk briefly about another piece to the state's mandates, universal screening for reading difficulties. So as we move forward through this section, I want you to note this data is very different from MAP data and state assessments. To start with, many of you are hearing the terms dyslexia test or dyslexia screener. We're not talking about diagnosing dyslexia. We're identifying risk for future reading difficulties. Just like high blood pressure is used in the medical world as an indicator for potential health concerns, looking at various literacy markers at specific times, for example, oral reading fluency is an excellent indicator for future reading success 1st through 12th grade, okay? These measures, particularly progress monitoring data, are used to measure and show continuous growth or lack of progress over time. So some of you, especially those of you in the elementary world, are very familiar with these terms, the assessments and what they're looking for. But for some of you, these terms are new. And I think it's important, all grades, K through 12, to understand the term, the acronym, and what essential literacy skill is being assessed. So starting with FSF, for first sound fluency, we're looking at those phonemic awareness skills. LNF, or letter naming fluency. PSF, phoneme segmentation, looking at alphabetic principle. Or NWF, for nonsense word fluency, really looking at those advanced and basic phonics skills. And then, as we said, 1st through 12th grade, we are looking at that ORF, or oral reading fluency, where we put it all together to see if we have the skills necessary to be a skilled reader. So a long history of research tells us that these early literacy skills are excellent predictors of future reading success. The PSF is really crucial in indicating at the end of kindergarten, but not so much at the beginning. And so that's why we have that FSF. That's why it was created. The NWF, or I'm saying a lot of acronyms, seeing if you're following on that chart, the nonsense word fluency starting in the middle of kindergarten all the way through the middle of 2nd grade is an excellent indicator of future reading success. Our oral reading fluency then comes in 1st through 12th grade. Some things to note as you are listening to your students read, whether it be in their classroom text or if you are someone giving an oral reading fluency assessment, it's important to note, do these children read with high accuracy? Are the words they're reading correct? What's their rate like? Is it too slow? Too fast? Do they have an appropriate intonation? Are they very flat? Are they using expression when they come to some of the punctuation markers indicating an increase in expression? Are they reading too quietly, acting overly nervous, their hands moving about or their legs wiggling underneath the table? These are all things to jot down or take note of when you're gauging those reading skills. So how does this guide our instruction? When we talk about progress monitoring or benchmark goals, it tells us what children we should be working with. Benchmark is designed to be the lowest acceptable score. It's not where we want our average. A child scoring at benchmark is telling us they have a 70 to 80% chance, if we do not alter instruction, of reaching the next suggested goal or benchmark or essential reading skill needed to be a skilled reader. So to restate that, let's think about that. A 70 to 80% chance if we do not alter that instruction. So what does that mean? The percent chance
The student will be a skilled reader in the future without changing up how we instruct them. Children showing well below benchmark, we need to act with a sense of urgency because this is based on the lowest possible score. Once we get them to benchmark, we don't want to let up. We don't want to get comfortable. We want to push and we want higher. Again, that above benchmark does not mean above the average. It means above the lowest possible score. The first indicator that we look at in those scoring is that composite score, but we would have to look beyond that. Sometimes our children that are at risk for future difficulty have some breakdowns within that composite, and we have to look beyond it. So again, for those giving the measures at the secondary level, there's a lot of information to come, okay? I don't want all of this information to cause more sense of panic or unease. There is more information to come. Also, every building has a problem-solving team with individuals with training and knowledge and literacy. This is an area for continued development and professional learning, and Blue Valley's focused and committed to that work. Every journey starts with a step, and the universal screener is our first step to detecting who needs help. And Jennifer is now going to talk a little bit more about the KSDE regulations.
Let's take a look at KSDE regulations. I share these with you not to alarm you in any way, because we've got our eye on this and we'll get through this together, but just want you to know, here's some new policies of the state that are especially impactful in the area of literacy. KSDE, like Blue Valley, views the acquisition of literacy skills as the utmost importance. And as such, there are a few accountability components to ensure that districts are in compliance. And I'll share these with you briefly. During this 2021 school year, all students in kindergarten through 12th grade are required to complete literacy screening. When screening shows that certain students are below level, the grade level benchmarks in reading, the students' literacy skills are then examined in further depth. As an accountability measure, KSDE collects scores from specific grade levels on specific literacy metrics. Teachers with a multitude of certifications were required to complete this total 6 hours of training. In Blue Valley, knowing that literacy impacts all content areas, a decision was made for all teachers to complete this training. Note again that much of the training you have heard in these last sessions was specifically set forth by the Kansas State Department of Education, and any changes to the presentations had to be approved by KSDE. Also, all districts must report on and provide evidence of their literacy screening efforts as a piece of our accreditation process called KISA. Districts that are not in compliance with these literacy screening efforts run the risk of not being fully accredited. Lastly, beginning in this school year, 2021-22, all districts are required to use the approach of structured literacy in teaching students how to read. As with screening, we must report on our structured literacy implementation as a piece of our accreditation process. That was a lot to absorb. Again, we're working on that, and we'll certainly do all we can to support you as you implement both structured literacy and the universal screener. Moving on, let's talk a little bit about Nearpod. Last spring, we launched Nearpod K-12 with our Blue Valley District Premium Plus license. Our district license provides teachers with access to pre-made interactive lessons and videos from the Nearpod library. It offers a seamless integration with both Canvas and ClassLink and unlimited storage and larger class sizes to make lessons interactive and get student insights in real time. This was what we were doing in this professional learning today. You can visit the Nearpod resource page in the Teacher Hub via the Teacher Hub Canvas course on your dashboard or by using the link on your screen. You can also reach out to Jeremy Davis, the Secondary Blended Learning Coordinator, or Lindsay Hallett, our Elementary Blended Learning Coordinator, to learn how Nearpod can elevate the teaching and learning in your classroom. We thank them again for being here with us today to lend a hand. Well, colleagues, you've reached the end of this professional learning, and in fact, your 6 hours of literacy professional learning. I want to thank you for your time dedicated to learning about the science of reading and structured literacy. And there are a couple of items for you to complete now. First, in just a minute, we'll leave you time to complete an exit ticket through a Google form. This is your verification of your attendance and participation today. You can access the Google form through the QR code on the left of your screen or by entering the bit.ly. Please note, you will need to use your Blue Valley credentials to utilize the QR code. Once you've completed the exit ticket and submitted it, be sure you also today sign the attendance sheet for PD in your building. We're asking that you complete both steps in order to verify your participation in today's professional learning. If you are a teacher whose licensure requires that you participate in this professional learning, we will submit that information to the state on your behalf. I want to end by thanking each of you for all you do each and every day for our students in Blue Valley. Know that you are appreciated. All of us involved in bringing this presentation to you today wish you a wonderful school year. We are available to support you and the students in your classes as you work to implement structured literacy and provide highest quality literacy experiences for all of your students. Thank you and have a great school year.